Stitch this with the stupidest thing a man has ever mansplained to you. I'll go first. I was 20 years old when my ex explained to me what a pillow is used for. He told me that the pillow is used to support your neck and your head. I was also a feature speaker at a poetry night, and a man came up to me and explained to me what I meant by the title of my poetry collection. And he was wrong, and I told him that he was wrong, and he said, "No, I think this is what you were trying to get at." And I was like, "No, you're wrong." And he did not believe me, even though it was a title I created for a work of poems that I wrote. Stitch this with the stupidest thing a man has ever mansplained to you.
Oh my god, I've got such a good one for this. It happened a year ago and it still blows my freaking mind. So I was on this date with a guy, that was my first mistake, and it was going pretty well, like we seemed to be getting on, we're having a laugh. Now, I have a toxic trait where I tend to go on feminist rants in the middle of dates. I don't know why, it always happens, but he was taking it really well and we seemed to align on a lot of our views. And then we got onto our jobs, and for context, I'm an engineer, so it's a very male-dominated space, and he asked me about that, and he said, like, how do you find that? Do you experience sexism? Have you had any issues in that workspace? And I replied that generally the guys that I've worked with have been really great, but you do get the occasional guy mansplaining your job back to you, which can be quite annoying. I shit you not, this guy goes, well, I mean, mansplaining is when you explain something back to someone that they already know. So if the guy's explaining an aspect of your job that he knows about that you already also know about, that would be mansplaining. Fucking mansplaining back to me in a conversation about mansplaining, and it wasn't even a joke because I called him out and he went, "Oh shit, the audacity."
Stitch this with the stupidest thing a man has ever mansplained to you.
I changed my flat tire in front of a whole bunch of girls and a dude, and then the dude decided to tell all of us that when you run over something sharp, it pops! And because of the weight of the car, and there's a hole in the tire, air is going to come out of it. He did that because he felt inferior to me and wanted to impress the ladies because the ladies were focused on the fact that I just knew how to change a tire. You know what the fucking kicker is? You know what the kicker is? I didn't care if they were impressed because I was trying to impress him because I am a homosexual.
With the stupidest thing a man has ever mansplained to you.
First date with a fucking idiot. He puts on a movie on his projector, and I'm really high, right? So I just say things, high thoughts. I'm like, oh, isn't it crazy that the black that we're seeing right now is actually just the color of the wall? And he's like, no, projector creates black. And I'm like, yeah, it does that by not projecting a color or light in that spot, because this is supposed to be black. If I turn off the light right now, that's black. And he went on to just argue and insist that I was wrong and that somehow a fucking projector creates some sort of just nothingness, blackness, the wall is now black, when that's not fucking true. The black is the color of the wall. And he insisted that I was wrong. Insisted.
Stitch this with the stupidest thing a man has ever mansplained to you.
Kirby, I shit you not, Kirby. This little guy hangs on my backpack. We go everywhere together. And one time I was at this restaurant and this guy that works there came up to me and he's like, "Oh, I like the little Kirby that's hanging on your backpack." And I was like, "Oh, thanks." And I thought that was going to be the end of the conversation. But no, this guy proceeds to go, "I bet you only like him because he's cute. Have you ever played a Kirby game? They're actually really fun." I cut him the fuck off. I was like, "Yes, actually. I've played almost every single Kirby game. He's one of my favorite video game characters. I think my favorite Kirby game is Kirby and the Crystal Shards on the N64. This guy looked so shocked that I even knew what that was, the game and the video game system. He was like, and I was like, "Yeah, have a good day." And I walked off. Motherfucker, how are you going to try to mansplain and gatekeep Kirby? Half of his fucking appeal is that he's cute and his games are pretty simple. Oh my god, I'm still not over that. It's Kirby!
Stitch this with the stupidest thing a man has ever mansplained to you.
When I was in high school, a good friend caused her own death by carbon monoxide poisoning. When I was in college, my mother was killed in a car crash, and my dad died of a broken heart shortly after. I had a series of reproductive losses by miscarriage. I had a good friend cause her own death by gunshot. Another died from an aneurysm, a third to breast cancer, another to stroke, and of course there's been heart attacks. My brother-in-law died of COVID, and my husband died 3 years ago of lung cancer. My master's thesis is on grief and bereavement. I've written a book. My doctorate is in clinical psychology. And yet a man told me I didn't really understand grief, and he explained it to me. Who has he lost in his own life? His dog died when he was 12.
Stitch this with the stupidest thing a man has ever mansplained to you.
Off-duty OBGYN here. Where do I begin? So I used to do circumcisions on newborn baby boys, and a dad was very specific on how he wanted his son's circumcision done and offered to show me his own circumcision so that I would see exactly what he was referring to. I refused. And the more than once that a gentleman had to explain to me how to repair an episiotomy to his exact specifications immediately after the delivery of his child. And then in the office, more than once, gentlemen insisting that I give their partners medications so that they would want to have relations with them. And of course, there was the more than once that I was told in front of people's partners that I was too pretty to be a doctor.
Stitch this with the stupidest thing a man has ever mansplained to you.
One time I went to the grocery store with my ex-boyfriend because I needed tampons, and I had made a comment about how I thought that tampons were getting so expensive. And he straight up told me to stop complaining. And I said, no, tampons and pads should be free because it's something that a woman needs and something that they just can't control. He then says, no, buying one box of tampons is like buying a bulk item from Costco. And I was like, what are you talking about? Some of the boxes only have like 10 or 20 in them. That's not a lot. And he tries to tell me that women only need one tampon throughout their whole entire cycle. I'm full on arguing with him in the middle of the grocery store saying, no, you have to change them every couple hours or you can get toxic shock syndrome and get really, really sick and potentially die. And he said, see, you're paying for something that could be deadly. Of course it's not going to be free.
I broke up with him after that.
Stitch this with the stupidest thing a man has ever mansplained.
1979. I'm going to put a down payment on my own house. I'm walking on cloud. I'm stuck. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm taking the keys. I don't know. I don't want to open the car. I go to the car. I see it's no gasoline in the car. I go to a gas station. I take the gal. Listen, $20 are numero siete. The guy behind me, see, she doesn't talk so good English. Hey, miss, do you know to put gasoline? I said to myself, what an idiot. What an asshole. I just moved the car. I don't know to put. But I played dummy and he put the gasoline for me. And all of a sudden he became like a macho and he's telling me, my name is Carter, you want to go out for dinner? Listen, Carter, piece of shit, you better buzz off. You are talking to the wrong tree. I'm buying now my own house. So better luck next time. You better go to the lake, idiot.
Stitch this with the stupidest thing a man has ever mansplained to you.
One time I was at my husband's work function and one of his coworkers asked me what I do for a living. I said, oh, I'm getting my PhD. He goes, oh, what are you writing on? I say, oh, I actually do sci-fi adaptations of the canon, mostly comic book adaptations of like the Odyssey and Outer Space, that kind of thing. It's kind of my line. He goes, oh, you must be really excited for the Octavia Butler comics that are coming out soon. I go, what? And he goes, Octavia Butler was a really famous sci-fi writer. She wrote a lot of Afrofuturism. I don't know, have you heard of Parable of the Sower or Kindred? Those are kind of her most famous works. And you should really check them out. They sound relevant to your work. I said, do you possibly mean adaptations of her work? And he goes, no, I think they're going to be original comics that Octavia Butler's going to like be involved in writing. And I go, I don't think so. And this man proceeds to like really double down. Like he really thinks Octavia Butler's coming out with comics. So eventually I interrupt him and I go, sir, Octavia Butler died in 2006.
Stitch this with the stupidest thing a man has ever mansplained to you.
I was working out at the gym and warming up for squats when a man stepped onto my platform and asked if he could spot me. I politely declined, but he did not get the hint. He instead stayed on my platform and proceeded to mansplain the mechanics of a squat. He showed me where to put the bar on my back, how my feet should be positioned, and how I should breathe. I finally had to interject and let him know that 1, I was a personal trainer, 2, was a competitive powerlifter, and 3, had a national level powerlifting coach.